many ways, the humble PC case is actually one of my favourite components in any gaming PC build. With so many shapes, sizes, varieties and designs available, it's a highly personal choice, but also one that affects the way your build looks and even performs. But with so many PC cases to choose from, which ones are best for your next build? Well, today I'll be walking through my favourite budget, mid-range and high-end options based on our testing of more than 100 cases in the last year, and even talking about some upcoming case releases to keep an eye on. Let's do this! Supercharge your gaming experience with Zotac RTX 40 series GPUs. Powered by the ultra-efficient Ada Lovelace architecture, with support for NVIDIA DLSS 3.5 and of course full ray tracing, what's not to love? Zotac's range features their Ice Storm 2.0 advanced cooling technology and Spectra RGB lighting, which you can customize in software. A metal backplate, high build quality and 3+2 year warranty that extends to 5 years total with registration, gives you peace of mind now and into the future. Check them out at the first links in the description below. I'm going to walk through my favourite PC cases from least to most expensive. I'll link them all down below for latest pricing and availability, and you can navigate through the video using the timestamps on your screen now. Before that though, what is there to know about PC cases? There are 4 main sizes to choose from, and these link directly to the size of available motherboards. ITX being the smallest, followed by Micro ATX, which is a little larger, ATX, which is very much the standard size, and E or Extended ATX, which is that bit larger. Chassis that support eATX motherboards tend to support all the other sizes too, while chassis that support Micro ATX motherboards will likely support the Mini ITX standard as well. Typically though, what you don't want to do is buy a case that supports massive motherboards and then shove a small compact board in there. It looks silly, it's not a particularly efficient use of space, and it just doesn't make sense. Motherboard sizing isn't the only key metric to consider with a PC case. There are a few, and these are really critical. The first is the length of GPUs supported by the chassis. The longer the length of supported GPUs, the bigger the graphics card you can install. It works the same way with CPU air coolers, whereby they have a maximum height. You need to make sure this tallies up, otherwise the glass or perspex panel might not fit back on, while you'll also have maximum supported lengths for things like radiators in the case of a liquid cooler. This means if you want to put a 360mm all-in-one in, you need to make sure the case has room for a 360mm radiator. Be wary as well that if you have a radiator installed at the front of the case, and that's where the compatibility is coming from, this will impede and reduce the maximum length of graphics card. So just because that GPU length is big enough for the card you're shopping for, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fit. Some cases will include snazzy features like toolless drive mounting, RGB controllers and RGB implementation, but the more critical thing to look out for is the number of included fans. Ironically, as you get really high end in the market, cases nowadays often just don't include fans, as they presume you'll buy your own premium units separately. But in much of the mid-range standard area of the market, be wary of chassis with and without fans. I'll give you a great example. This Montech Sky 2 GX is very affordable, and you might think with the fans that it's a bit pricey compared to other options, but those other options, such as Corsair's upcoming 3500 range, might not have fans at that baseline price point. In terms of other bits of context to be aware of, mesh and ventilation is another really big one. That is going to massively help with things like airflow, of course. There's also cool quality of life features to look out for, things like GPU support brackets, RGB and fan controllers, and even on some cases, integrated LCD displays, which can be a really nice value add. Again, just because a case seems that bit more expensive, doesn't mean it's necessarily a total rip-off. Now, talking of things that aren't a rip-off, what is my favourite budget case on the market right now? And spoiler alert, it's been on the table this whole time. In at number 1, it's Fractal Design's Focus 2. Now, this particular model, again, is one of the slightly higher-end RGB fan models that gives you 2 140mm intakes at the front. Now, this is a fairly compact case, but rather neatly is still a standard ATX design that supports typically sized ATX motherboards. One thing I love about this case, other than the included fans and its affordable price point, is this large mesh panel. Now, not only with the RGB peeking through does it look really quite nice, but it's also highly practical and leads to a system that has plenty of airflow and stays relatively quiet, even when your components are spooling up to full power. The integrated I/O is okay, it's perhaps the only weak point of this case for the price. You get power, reset, headphone and mic jacks, and a pair of USB 3 ports. USB-C as an optional extra, don't really see that with other cases anymore, so again, a few points for Fractal Design deducted on that one. Otherwise though, the build quality is exactly what we've come to know and love from from one of the most popular and prevalent case manufacturers out there. These are the same people that make the one with the wood on the front called the Fractal North, which I really like too. For me, what makes this case stand out though at the budget price point is just build quality. It's built really well for the price and has good support for things like relatively long GPUs. Water cooling support is there, but not particularly fantastic compared to the competition. Things like a lack of cable grommets are a shame, but none of the metal edges are sharp. You're not going to cut yourself on this case, and it feels generally really quite nicely built. But if you want to spend a little bit more money, there are some really great options to consider, which coming in at number 2 is this, the Montech Sky Two GX. Now, of all the case brands on the market right now, Montech have got to be on the biggest roll of anybody. This is an update to their fairly popular Sky 2, with upgrades by way of airflow and clearance for things like GPU and radiators at the top of the chassis. Build quality is absolutely exceptional, loads of mesh and perforation around the case keeps temperatures low, and you get practical things like a grommet for the GPU cable, grommets for your motherboard power cables, and 3 included ARGB fans as standard. I added the one in at the rear to complete the look and give a bit more air pressure. Again, water cooling support's pretty good. I think those of you purchasing at this price point will be more bothered about air coolers, and Vetru's V5 fits nicely. Personally, a massive fan of this case and can highly recommend. Again, I'll link it down in the description below. Working up the price echelons just a little bit, and I'm afraid you're going to have to imagine the case here for this one. James, didn't you say you tested like 100? Why isn't it here? Well, it's actually because I want to give a special mention to Corsair's upcoming 3500X. Now, this isn't actually out for a couple of weeks yet, and we will be getting one in for review, to get subscribed for that. But at Computex, when I saw this firsthand in person, I was really impressed. Now, the base model comes in at $89. You don't get any fans for that, but for Corsair, that is, I mean, obscenely cheap. The airflow still looks to be pretty good. I like the form factor, it isn't too large, and the build quality, at least back at Computex when I got hands-on, felt absolutely fantastic. But what if you want something you can buy right now? Well, if that's the case, it doesn't get much better than this. Now, this is Montech's King 95. I almost don't need to mention the name of the case. It's so ubiquitous within the PC hardware space. Now, there's 2 versions to choose from. The standard King 95, which clocks in at around a $99 MSRP, and this, the King 95 Pro, which will cost you more at $149-ish. Now, the only difference between these is the included controller and RGB fans. Now, this has 240mm on the side, 320mm at the bottom, and a 120mm unit at the back, which, if you'll look carefully, has been stolen out of this case into the Sky 2 GX I talked about a moment ago. Now, what's really special about this is the curved glass panel at the front. It's made up of 2 pieces, so a standard curved and a tempered glass piece on the side. The closest we've tested to this would actually be MSI's $399 case, which has a single piece of curved glass, which looks, again, really quite nice, but I'm afraid the Montech King 95 takes it for me. Support for everything like GPUs, radiators is really fantastic. Room, of course, for those radiators at the top, and with this being a dual chamber case, you get plenty of room for your power supply at the rear, and the ability to hide your cable mesh too. Plus, the party piece is this RGB strip which wraps around the front panel of the chassis and gives a nice aesthetic glow to the whole build. Really a big fan of this from Montech, and I have to say, I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. For like $100, $150, depending on the version, this is one of the best ways you can spend your money right now. In at number 5 is yet another PC case. Now, this is NZXT's H7 Flow, the sort of V2 version, if you will. Now, the original H7 Flow was one of my favorite cases of all time. Now, NZXT have actually almost remixed the original H7 Flow with this, and there's a few key changes that I want to talk you through. Now, if I remove this nice and tallest tempered glass panel, you'll see that they've opened loads of room in the power supply area down the bottom. That's because a quick look at the back of the case, you'll see they've actually rotated the power supply sideways. This improves PSU airflow and again regains some room at the front of the case. You could almost argue that that makes this a dual chamber PC case as well, as if not enough PC cases were already dual chamber. What I like about this is the build quality. I like all these panels which easily pop in and out with these sort of like easy to use clips. The I/O is again good, USB ports in Type-C and Type-A varieties, and I like the fact you can recess some fans here for a cleaner aesthetic overall. What I'm not entirely sure on though is the use of 120mm fans at the front. They definitely should have been 140 for the price of this case on the RGB Flow version, and I think the dead space at the bottom, while a trend that actually seems quite popular, but I'm not entirely convinced on this trend just yet. Let me know what you think of the H7 Flow. It's different to the King 95, different to Corsair's upcoming 3500 range as well. In at number 6 and working through to the high end, this is Lian Li's O11 Vision. Now, this is really spiritually the first proper true fish tank case on the market. Lian Li did it with their O11D series where they had glass on the side and glass on the front. This has glass on the top too, too, and if you look upwards, the glass is actually slightly reflective. Now this is one of the visually most pleasing PC cases we've ever tested, and it's one of the best we've ever built in too. Now that isn't to say there aren't some disadvantages. Airflow is not as good as lots of other options out there. You do get quite a hefty amount of intake at the bottom, as well as intake on the side, and you can use the rear, or the bottom for that fact, as exhaust as well. The main thing really is the inability to pull in air from the front and push it out the back, or use the top area for intake or exhaust too. Now, you've got to, in my opinion, be prepared to fill this with a large enough GPU, fans at the bottom, side and rear, for it to make sense. The rear dual chamber design as well is good for keeping cables and power supply clutter out of the way. This is one of those cases that can look really empty if you build the wrong configuration inside. In at number 7 on our recommendations is sort of a brief segue into Corsair's 6500X. Again, this is a case we've built in here on the channel and actually assembled a full liquid cooled build in not that long ago. That provides more of a hybrid between what you see with the O11 Vision and a case that focuses more on airflow. It retains the glass panel at the front and glass panel on the side, but at the top brings in a greater degree of mesh airflow and provides a system with all-in-all more radiator mounting support for not only all-in-ones, but as I say, custom loop solutions too. And while I'd say the build quality and materials do not feel quite as good as what you'll find on the O11 Vision, it's still one of the best cases I think we've looked at in a little while. In at number 8 on the list, and we're into what I'd call honourable mentions territory at this point. We've established awesome budget, mid-range and high-end cases, but there's some that don't quite fit the mould that you should definitely consider for your next build. The first of these is Thermaltake's The Tower 300. Now Thermaltake have been at it with their tower branding for a while, and the Tower 100 and 200 were cool, but frankly nothing compared to the newer Tower 300. Again, we've built in this on the channel a number of times and really like it. It also tends to perform better from an airflow perspective than other options, as it brings in cool air from the bottom and kicks the hot air out the top. I really like what Thermaltake have done here, and a wide range of colours again makes it that bit different. Personally, I'll stick with the black or the white, but I appreciate the choice to give people different colours to choose from. Talking of choice, if you've completely lost your mind, my case recommendation of number 9 will surely help to satisfy your urge for craziness. It is of course ROG's new Hyperion. Now again, this is a case I built in recently. Now the Hyperion comes in 2 flavours, a BTF and non-BTF version, meaning it supports ASUS's new back-to-front motherboard connections. That's great if you want a really sleek build, and is designed fully around an X-frame at the front, which I think looks fantastic. These provide a really nice set of carrying handles as well to help easily move the case around, and the internal RGB panels and RGB lighting at the front of the case are again that bit special. Now to be clear, it is expensive, and there is no way of putting it. It's not a cheap chassis, and it certainly doesn't tick any value for money boxes either. With that being said though, certainly a case I think has a wow factor and brings something just that little bit different. And finally, in at number 10 is GeekaWhat's Darkbase 701. Now you might think, James, this looks more generic than something like the Hyperion or Tower 300, but this is actually my recommendation for those of you with a focus on silence. GeekaWhat do a fantastic job, even on cases that feature nice RGB lighting and fans like this, of keeping those audible noise levels well under control. And while they will charge you a price premium for the pleasure, I do think for lots of scenarios it's fully justified. I get people say to me all the time that they want a build that just isn't too garish, isn't too out there, and isn't too in your face. And if that's what you want, GeekaWhat is certainly a brand I'd consider. Now I said that this was sort of the final case. I want to address the elephant in the room. And as far as elephants go, it's a small and rather cute one. This is Deepcool's CH360. Now those of you who have watched the channel for a while will know that I've featured numerous Deepcool chassis in my case roundups over the years, and I was pretty gutted to have to exclude this CH360 from my recommendations today. I actually think it's one of the best budget cases out there, full stop. Its bigger brother, by the way, the CH560, is also awesome too. The reason is all due to recent sanctions in the US. Now I don't want to get into the politics of it too much, and you can take time to read up on this issue yourself. In fact, Gamers Nexus recently produced a video on it which explains everything in a bit more detail. Because of that, Deepcool chassis and all of Deepcool's product portfolio are now harder to find in the US than they ever have been. And we're not sure whether this is going to have a knock-on effect in terms of availability in Europe and in the UK in the months that follow. Even if you can get a hold of one of these right now in the US, you have to be a little bit careful, as for lots of complicated legal reasons, Deepcool may not actually be able to serve the warranties offered with their cases, coolers or other products, even if they wanted to. Personally, I'm kind of gutted about this. I went to Deepcool's factory recently before this news was released and had an amazing time seeing how lots of these cases are put together. But they're a hard one for me to recommend, particularly on the basis of the warranty, as I say, without going into the politics of any of the news or the decisions that are out there at the moment. What do you guys think of the cases I've recommended today. Any favourites? Any cases you think I've missed? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this, get subscribed for more PC building, fun and games. And as always, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Lots of cases on the floor everywhere. Yes, I like cases.